Story 1. Anyone whose preconceived beliefs it supported would believe it. Anyone whose preconceived beliefs it opposed would claim it is a fraud. Story 2. Probably nothing. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has had names for years, yet hardly anyone on that list has been identified or prosecuted. Laws only mean something if they are enforced. Story 3. Nothing. Even if the administration itself released it, the outcome would be nothing. We passed the point when decency was a requirement for public office a long time ago. Story 4. Since about 2008, this group has not been trustworthy. Until 2008, they were working out of enthusiasm, but then the team changed and they started working for specific individuals. Story 5. What was the global reaction to the Panama Papers? Literally, it was "oh no" anyway. Let's discuss this new meme. Story 6. Trump himself could release the files unredacted, and Make America Great Again would have no issues with any of it. With that in mind, it is a wonder why he does not just do it. Story 7. I think it would be a massive letdown. People have built up these huge conspiracies in their minds due to the lack of transparency, and the truth could never live up to them. I also think some innocent people would be hurt by this. There is zero chance that every person in his orbit was involved in the horrible things he did. However, I bet it would raise some eyebrows. Story 8. Impotent but legitimate outrage for some. Feigned, cynical, self-serving outrage for others. Par for the course in modern politics. Story 9. Truth is becoming a thing of the past. Very soon, we will no doubt see the first mistrial due to artificial intelligence. Epstein files will be the same. It is fake will be the response of those involved. Story 10. I think they are actually more powerful in limbo as they are now. The longer Donald Trump keeps them and refuses to release them, the bigger a deal it becomes. As soon as they are released, people will reconcile them to fit their already formed worldview. The reason I say that is we already knew he was a rapist and a sexual predator before he won the first time. Story 11. It would need to have the classified markers on it to be more believable. One would hope he would be arrested, but discovery should be a fun time for all involved. Story 12. Anonymous constantly claimed that they were releasing his taxes but never did. I don't think they have the ability to obtain and release these files. While we're discussing this, does anyone remember when the Panama Papers were supposed to expose many wealthy individuals? What happened with that story? Story 13. The same thing happened when evidence was released that wealthy individuals were evading taxes using offshore accounts. Nothing changed, except the person reporting might face suspicious death. Story 14. There is no such thing as an anonymous man. It is just a group of basement-dwelling nerds pretending to be revolutionaries. There is a reason the group has never done anything of real consequence. They are irrelevant. I would be pleased to be proven wrong, but I will not hold my breath. Story 15. 30% skepticism or outright denial. 70% of people making memes out of the names that come out. 0% change, and that is the problem. Story 16. Americans overestimate how much the world cares about their dishonest politicians and celebrities. Story 17. Half the world will scream, "We want justice." The other half will refresh the page to make sure their name is not on the list. Story 18. They will never be released until well after the consequences for those involved no longer affect them. There are so many important, wealthy, and influential people involved that society would essentially fall apart. Story 19. What a foolish hypothetical. No version of the truth will ever be revealed. He will get away with it, as always. Story 20. Make America Great Again will do what they have always done. Move the goalposts another 10 yards so they do not have to be held accountable for their bad decisions. Story 21. Nothing meaningful would happen. Donald Trump could burn a pile of newborn babies on live television and he would not lose support. Story 22. Enough of the files have been leaked already. The problem is that if they do not come from an official or credible source, then politicians can just say fake news all day long. That is why the ones recently released by the Department of Justice with Donald Trump's name redacted do not matter. We all know it is Donald Trump's name. We all know Donald Trump is a liar. But if it is not from an official or credible source, then politically it did not happen. Story 23. Some people would take the fall, the really important people, that is, Donald Trump and those who support him or are useful to him, would claim that their names were added by Joe Biden, Barack Obama, George Soros, or someone else. Their followers would believe them, tie the case up in court, and likely evade accountability once again. Story 24. You Americans have to stop thinking you are the center of the world. Since the former president returned, the world sees the United States of America as real fools. Not every American is a fool, but those who voted for that person are. Keep your hands off the rest of the world. Story 25. The affected parties take a hit to their public image, but nobody is prosecuted. The whistleblowers will likely be investigated and promptly silenced. Story 26. The Republican Party would strongly argue that engaging in sexual activity with a 13-year-old is considered acceptable in their view and that anyone in former President Donald Trump's position would have acted similarly. Story 27. Trump himself could release the files and openly admit to participating in everything imaginable, and nothing would happen. Story 28. 0. If it is bad, supporters will simply rationalize it away as they always do. I have serious doubts they will ever get tired of his behavior. Story 29. Anonymous has not done anything. Everything they claimed to have was already known. They have not taken any action. Story 30. We would probably be shocked that Anonymous did anything at all, since all it is now is people in a poor quality mask trademarked by Time Warner pretending they will do something significant, but they never follow through. It is a big joke. Story 31. Most people would acknowledge it and demand action. Certain influential individuals would have a vested interest in labeling it fraud. Story 32. Trump supporters would not stop supporting him. If he throws his support behind any Republican on the list, conservative voters will not abandon them either. Democrats will abandon anyone on the list and reject them, which is the right thing to do. However, independent voters will still say that both parties are equally bad. Story 33. The problem is it would be impossible to verify that nothing had been changed or edited. This would completely undermine any chance of punishment for those involved. Story 34. Anyone old enough to remember the Panama Papers scandal? The same thing will happen then. Absolutely nothing. Story 35. The Epstein files contain approximately 10,000 hours of child exploitation material. Absolutely nothing would happen because everyone would destroy their computer as soon as they opened the file and saw what it contained and how illegal it was to have it on their computer. Story 36. The world would lose its mind. Powerful men are finally exposed. Honestly, I would enjoy watching them squirm while sipping wine in bed. Story 37. Same as when Epstein's Black Book was released, which is really the only Epstein list there is. Since it contained at least 5 Trump organization names and no Clintons, the right completely ignored it. Story 38. I was wondering earlier why hacking groups have not come forward attempting to obtain the files from somewhere. Story 39. Let us be honest. You either already know what the former president did or you are okay with it. Domestically, it will not matter. Internationally, many countries will continue to act as they currently do and try to prevent him from taking vindictive actions against your nation based on personal feelings. Story 40. Probably the same as the Panama Papers. Yes, we knew they were stealing from us and breaking the law, but what can we do? Continues playing on phone. Story 41. Less than a decade ago, someone released papers about how the United States illegally surveils almost everyone in the country. And you know what Americans did? Nothing. The President of the United States might as well introduce a mandatory harem for himself and the right to have sex with every woman before her marriage, and Americans would still do nothing about it. Story 42. They would be very ashamed for continuing to do absolutely nothing, but I think they would continue as they are now. Like everyone knows, the bare minimum that Trump and Clinton are on them. Democratic leadership could be criticizing the Trump administration on this, but they would rather do what they always do and preemptively give in. Story 43. The MAGA movement would say it is fake, and the group would nod their heads in agreement as they always do. It is a true cult. Story 44. A collective shrug. This has already been included in the support or lack of support for Donald Trump. His supporters will figure it is a hoax, and his detractors already know it is true. Story 45. It would not matter because Hunter Biden's laptop is still out there. Have you seen Hillary's emails? Story 46. People will say it is fake. I believe Anonymous is the only group that would publish the original files. No one in the government would ever do it. Story 47. Do you think Donald Trump is involved? To clarify, I do not support or like him. However, his frequent advocacy for the release could have been the greatest bluff in human history. Story 48. There are literal victims with stories. You do not need a file or sheet. Please listen to women. Story 49. Some people will believe it is the complete Epstein files. Others will think it is only some of the Epstein files. Some will believe it is entirely fabricated fake Epstein files. Story 50. What would the global reaction be if Anonymous did anything at all? They are a bogeyman who appears every few years, makes a vague threat, and then nothing happens. They are less than useless. Story 51. Yes, sure, but I think most of the damage is already done. We just have to keep the pressure on former President Donald Trump. Story 52. Anyone who did not like the contents would say they are fake, and others would respond that they already knew this. Story 53. Ever since Anonymous' main founder Sabu was found, taken down, and quietly turned into a Federal Bureau of Investigation informant around 2013, the chances of that organization doing anything contrary to the will of the elites are mere fantasy. Story 54. You will be surprised by some of the names included and others missing, to the point where its authenticity will always be questionable. Story 55. I think many rich and powerful people would be very upset. We would have a great start in the direction of truth and justice. Story 56. Most of the world already knows the person, and many Americans have serious flaws. The files would not change anything. Story 57. People who know Donald Trump is a bad person would be surprised when everyone who does not know Donald Trump is a bad person, because they have been misled and influenced for a decade, dismisses it all as fake news. Story 58. Make America Great Again loyalists will start the spin cycle. Donald Trump will start signing executive orders to diffuse and please his puppet masters. Democrats will complain. The Supreme Court will find some archaic law to justify actions. Southern churches will use their bias to promote Donald Trump doing the Lord's work. Donald Trump's sons will continue making multimillions. Nothing new here, just older people longing for their happy days. Unfortunately, for most, the next 900 days will be challenging. Good luck, citizens. Story 59. It is a good question and surprising that hackers have not infiltrated the data up to this point, nor has there been someone on the inside who has leaked it. Story 60. Some people may be suspicious and question the legitimacy of the list since anyone can claim to be anonymous. Story 61. The Make America Great Again movement will claim it is a conspiracy and completely false because their leader, Donald Trump, is involved in those files. They may start a movement suggesting that being a child rapist and trafficker is acceptable. Story 62. It's simple. Those who want to believe it will, and those who don't want to will deny it's real. The United States of America will treat Anonymous as terrorists after this because it is a breach of United States state secrets. After a maximum of 3 days of internet chaos, everyone moves on. Just like the John F. Kennedy files, decades of speculation end for everyone to move on in a few days. Story 63. The Epstein files will be released around the same time that artificial intelligence becomes so advanced that no one will believe any video. Story 64. They would find out America is okay with pedophilia if you were rich, and they were very excited about cuties on Netflix. Story 65. People will still believe what they want to believe, but it will put unexpected people under scrutiny or absolve others from suspected guilt. Afterward, a wild witch hunt could start. Story 66. If they had it, they would. They do not have it. Also, they are not exactly a group. They are just an identity hackers use. Story 67. Most of us would say, yes, no kidding. Magazine readers would say it is fake. there would probably be a few genuinely surprised people who somehow did not realize it before. Story 68. I doubt there is a list of individuals who committed sexual assault. There may be some incriminating evidence in the files, but most of it is likely on the recordings. Story 69. If anyone released a list, it would be claimed as fabricated or false. If anyone released anything of consequence, such as thousands of hours of surveillance video, the person who leaked it would be immediately tracked down by the Federal Bureau of Investigation under the pretext of charging them with distributing child pornography. Even if the leaker was not American and the leak occurred outside the country, the United States might extradite or even use extraordinary rendition, which is the illegal kidnapping of a foreign citizen abroad, to apprehend the leaker. Story 70. It is going to happen with Donald Trump's name erased, and nothing will come of it because this government is so broken it is unfathomable. Story 71. The waters have been muddied so far beyond recognition that the general public is too cynical at this point to settle on any kind of conclusion. Even if there were a hearing and an exposition of every detail, not much would change, most egregiously in Congress. Story 72. A lot of news drama but nothing of substance. What would a list price mean anyway? Let's say it showed that Donald Trump traveled to the island many times. It would not prove he did anything there, and he would either deny it as fake or just say, "Sure, I went there but did nothing inappropriate." And his supporters would believe it. Story 73. A few weeks ago, someone claiming to be anonymous said a false flag was going to happen on July 4th, but nothing happened. Story 74. We will all start wondering when Donald Trump ever found the time to run his businesses into the ground. Story 75. Democrats and Republicans would yell at each other relentlessly, trying to say the other team's wrongdoers are worse than theirs. Story 76. I think most people would be surprised that Anonymous could actually do something useful at this moment. Story 77. The key to making people believe anything is first getting them to disbelieve everything else. This is the model of every tyrant, autocrat, con artist, and dictator since the beginning of time, including Donald Trump. Story 78. The global reaction would be like an episode of House of Cards, except with more genuine outrage, fewer fictional characters, and probably no justice. Story 79. Forgotten by the masses in a month, just like everything every other whistleblower or hacktivist group has ever leaked. Story 80. Elation that Anonymous is actually capable of more than empty threats read by an angsty teenager hiding behind a Guy Fawkes mask. Story 81. It depends on what is in the files. That is just common sense. However, Reddit acts according to its own views, which can be nonsensical. Story 82. Anonymous is not a reputable source because it is an idea, not an actual group. Anyone can wear the mask and make any accusations they want under that name. People against it will call foul, and people in support will agree. No accountability means no verification of truth. Story 83. The entire world, except for about a third of the United States, would be outraged at Donald Trump because it confirms their thoughts. That third of the United States will also be outraged, but only because the truth is exposed. Additionally, why are there not more members of the Democratic Party in the files? Story 84. We, the public, demand accountability. Republicans would claim President Biden put them in this position, but they would say anything. All the Democrats were involved. In general, nothing will happen, just finger-pointing and claims that God forgives them. Story 85. Arguably, one of the biggest secrets of the 20th century was revealed prior to December 18, 2008, when the perpetrator of the leak died. The scandal that so many subsequent scandals were named after, the scandal forcing a president of the United States resignation, the only time in American history that happened, the scandal that brought forth a push for a conservative news outlet proprietor by the likes of Rupert Murdoch, a secretive source who provided information to two investigative reporters that did all this, you would think would be remembered and forefront in thought to all, especially to those who lived through it. Yet, I doubt 2% of the general population could identify his position, let alone the name of the deep throat some 50-plus years later. Story 86. It isn't the files that are important. It's making him and the others annoyed and squirming. It's about causing them to point fingers at each other and creating chaos for them as they scramble to stay ahead. The files are like a mosquito buzzing around his face, and he can't get rid of it. We already know they are going to feed the public drivel. These people are in power, but they are brittle. Keep applying pressure until they break. Story 87. Trump could be on video abusing a 10-year-old, and nothing would happen to him. Everyone else would not have as much protection, but they are still all rich with significant protection. Even if they get canceled, they can just flee to another country before legal repercussions and reinvent themselves. Look at Prince Andrew. They will all be like that. Only the lowest levels will face any prosecution. I think Anonymous has shown it is all bark, no bite. The only significant thing they have ever actually exposed was Ashley Madison. Story 88. It would be memes on social media and people gossiping about it for a couple of weeks, followed by no repercussions for those involved. Story 89. I doubt anyone would care, nor that there are any files to speak of. There are many publicly available legal documents from various depositions and discovery in the case to review. Everyone knows who is involved and who has looked at those documents. Everyone is flawed. And there is the challenge. Because Donald Trump promised to release them, made a conspiracy part of his rhetoric and campaign promises, and fed them to his supporters to fuel his return, he now has to deliver. His supporters are not accepting distractions. It is also close to a point of no return where the faithful will have to either double down or face collapse. I do not know about you, but I am preparing to watch closely. The fall of the American experiment is remarkable. Story 90. Nothing would happen because we already know several people on the list, and nothing has happened to them. Story 91. Likely far less than anyone is hoping. The government would just lie and misdirect. They would probably then release their own version curated to sow doubt on the authenticity of both versions. Story 92. Probably pretend surprise, especially at the news. They would win an Emmy for that performance for sure. Story 93. The unreleased Epstein files are not actually files. It is a filing cabinet or pseudo-safe that held many CDs and DVDs. These appeared in his arrest photos, but we have never seen what was on them or heard of their existence since. The trafficked victims claim that the materials were used for blackmail and that they were involved in creating them. Therefore, it is not exactly files. And releasing something like that would be impossible unless they are found uploaded to a federal server, which is doubtful. Story 94. Nothing. Not only because Anonymous is a complete joke, but Donald Trump already has millions on board believing that it is a hoax or not a big deal. Story 95. If Anonymous was so great, would they already have the pedophile files after a decade? Anonymous is a hacker collective, right? No, it is a foolish facade like many things on this planet. Get a grip. Story 96. I think there would be no reaction. Watch this. This contains many of these files, but it is not discussed. Story 97. Will anything happen? Snowden exposed a whole bombshell, and nobody did anything. Seriously, I know that people have a tipping point and they can eventually reach it, but that tipping point is ridiculous. How far back do you need to be pushed into a corner before you retaliate? This is baffling. It's mind-boggling that we're even in the state we are after all the evidence that's come out about how we are constantly lied to, controlled, and manipulated. I have no doubt that humanity will be fine in the end, but society sure puts up with a lot before they actually start doing anything. Even after they do, they just get manipulated again by new people because they didn't have a plan going into their revolt, their revolution. The people always continue to be pawns when, in reality, they are the kings. Eventually, one day, when the masses take to heart the lesson taught by A Bug's Life, there will be nothing that can stop them, except forgetting that they are the true king. Story 98. I would be happier if Dr. Evil himself descended and fired his laser beam through the White House, killing everyone. Story 99. Half of the people would demand prosecution, half would say they are fake, and ultimately nothing will come of it. Story 100. I would be surprised because Anonymous has not done anything important or useful yet. All I have ever seen are a series of distributed denial-of-service attacks, which are notable but could be more impactful with fewer Guy Fawkes masks and more meaningful results. Story 101. It will never be released. If it is, it will not shock the people who already believed, and it will shock those who did not. Either way, nothing would come of it. People tend to be complacent when the government mistreats them. Story 102. It would not be the right way because it is not through proper channels. Also, what if becoming president was to erase his sins and become clean and free? Story 103. Globally, no one cares. Maybe a few activist groups here and there would take issue with who is on the list, but generally it is just another American issue. Story 104. Democrats might be surprised yet excited to use it as leverage for the midterm elections. Supporters of former President Donald Trump would probably lose what little reasoning they have left, then desperately attempt to spin the truth and defend their leader with worn-out phrases like, fake news. It's all artificial intelligence. The Democrats made it up. And the ever-popular, it's all just a hoax. The rest of the world might be unfazed and indifferent to the whole situation. My hope is that the victims finally get closure and some relief as those involved are held accountable for their disgusting and heinous crimes and left to rot in prison. A real prison, not some luxury federal facility for the wealthy. Unfortunately, none of that is likely to happen with the extremely corrupt administration in the White House paired with a majority of subservient justices on the Supreme Court existing solely to serve their inept leader. Story 105. If I am anonymous, I release the list gradually rather than all at once. Start with a prominent member of the Democratic Party. Democrats will turn against their own. Republicans will readily join in criticizing the Democrats. 1 week later, release another case involving a Democratic Party member. The response is the same. A week later, release information about an apolitical celebrity. Credibility increases because there is proof. The public becomes eager for more. Then, release information about the president, either immediately or after some delay. This approach creates maximum impact without immediately alienating supporters of former President Donald Trump, avoiding the need for them to use mental gymnastics to discredit the information. Story 106. Some people just want to watch the world burn. It's me. I'm some people. Burn it all to the ground. Story 107. The people who still support this administration are as misguided as those who thought Ronald Reagan did a good job. I know we are not supposed to use the word stupid because it does not help unite us, but these people have facts and figures and still choose to believe falsehoods. Eventually, if you still think the galaxy revolves around the Earth instead of the Sun, you will be considered incorrect. Story 108. At this point, nothing released from the Epstein files will be fully trusted. Even if it is 100% true, there will be people who say something is missing or that something is fake. Story 109. With all the other actions politicians and other influential people get away with, if they were ever released, does anyone actually think anything would happen? Or is it more for people to say, let's cancel that guy? I am not okay with any of the things they are alleged to have done, but it seems time and time again that wealthy individuals and politicians are not held accountable. For me, I do not even care if they get released because what is the end game if they do? Story 110. Nothing. Please refer to the Pentagon Papers. Some outrage for a few days, then back to regular life. Just prepare yourselves for Ghislaine Maxwell being pardoned very soon. Story 111. The federal government has known the names for years, and nothing has happened. If Anonymous, a rogue group of cybercriminals, were to leak it, nothing would happen because the information comes from a legally corrupt source and there has been plenty of time to investigate every individual in those files, but they have not. I would argue that Anonymous releasing it would do more harm than good. Story 112. The silence that follows is louder than the leak itself. Power protects itself globally, not just locally. Story 113. It would be chaos. The government would decry it as a false narrative and suspect some of us would see it as truth that would be ignored. Conspiracy theorists would argue from all sides. The person in charge would claim it has been tampered with and try to use it to avoid responsibility. Story 114, the same as the John F. Kennedy assassination files being released, surprised, and then the realization that we still have to pay taxes, go to work, and make a living. We are all just too insulated to care about anyone but ourselves. Story 115. Surprised that Anonymous did anything effective anywhere ever. V for Vendetta was a long time ago. Guy Fawkes was very radical. If someone respects fiction while ignoring history, then you have found someone ashamed of their indifference. They are not hard to find. Just look for anyone chasing the spotlight. Story 116. We would still have to go to work, and within 5 minutes something else insane would happen just like every day. Story 117. There are too many names and organizations listed. Nobody would believe it. All political spectrums would collapse, creating an international crisis. It would come down to which countries publicly deny or agree with it. It is a lose-lose-lose situation, followed by a win. Story 118. Honestly, I could not care less. Wealthy older individuals often engage in illegal activities and rarely face more than a minor consequence. Edit. This applies to wealthy older women as well. Story 119. A fair number of celebrities would get cancelled overnight. The president would be fine because he has a Congress with no spine and a judiciary in his back pocket. Story 120. We already saw this with the Panama Papers. The person who leaked it would be murdered, and nothing will happen to those implicated in the files. Story 121. I think they are actually more powerful in limbo as they are now. The longer Donald Trump holds onto them and refuses to release them, the bigger a deal it becomes. As soon as they are out there, people will reconcile them to fit their already formed worldview. The reason I say that is we already knew he was a rapist and a sex pest before he won the first time. Story 122. We already have photographic evidence of much of what happened, but apparently that does not matter, so probably nothing. Story 123. Assuming massive court trials of numerous celebrities and politicians occur, it would dominate the news for months until every one of them has been sentenced. Many people will be affected on both sides of America's political divide, but only those who supported the offenders will complain instead of focusing on what is best for humanity. Story 124. Honestly, I think some people may finally be canceled who have had it a long time coming, and some people will be brought into the spotlight who are deceased and thought to be amazing. I believe there will be a lot of outrage from some groups, but in the end, it will be a good thing. It may just take a decade for people to see it. Story 125. Everyone in the world is anonymous, and someone has the entire cache of evidence, yet no one is revealing it. Story 126. Sadly, given artificial intelligence and deep fakes in their current state, anyone who considers themselves an honest person would probably simply dismiss it as a hoax. Story 127. You know, Make America Great Again protects pedophiles. The rest of the world's reaction would be disgust, anger, and many emotions. I do not care if they are liberal, Republican, thousandaires, billionaires, priests, nurses, or anyone else. They all deserve to be investigated and charged. Story 128. Anonymous has no legitimacy or respect anymore, so nothing. Additionally, they are an arm of the Russian state at this point, so they would only release information if it benefited Vladimir Putin. Story 129. The only way it would make a big impact is if there is someone famous and totally unexpected included. If there were evidence that Donald Trump sexually abused underage children, nobody would be surprised. If there were more evidence that Prince Andrew was involved in inappropriate behavior, it would only confirm what people already believe. If some Republican senators were included, the press would downplay it and their voters would not care, since being accused of sexual offenses is already associated with being a Republican politician. The only way it would make a big splash is if there is an unexpected liberal or left-wing figure included. Someone the tabloid press would happily make front-page news for weeks. Story 130. If they have evidence, they should reveal it. Anyone who went to that island needs to be questioned. Also, just because Jeffrey Epstein is no longer alive, it does not mean that underage sex trafficking is not ongoing among the ultra-wealthy and powerful. It is time to hold all of them fully accountable for their vile behavior, especially those who knew about it and covered for them. Story 131. No reaction. Outside the United States, it is already known that Donald Trump is a pedophile. Other people who may be on the list are either not relevant or already known. Story 132. Nothing. People who can think already know that Donald Trump probably had the best-filled loyalty card. Others who support him because the way he governs fits into their worldview will continue to distort everything and delve into conspiracy theories. As humanity, we have long since reached the point of no return because people prefer to believe their feelings rather than the facts. Story 133. There is an Epstein list website where you can guess which of the two people were on the published list. There is also a version without names for the pictures, where people compete for high scores. Story 134. A public outrage and a political cleansing with many arrests occurred, similar to the events following the release of the Panama Papers. Story 135. Global reaction is limited. Each country struggles with its own problems. While it is an important topic in the United States, Eastern Europe focuses mainly on the war in Ukraine, and the US is shifting decisions regarding aid from week to week. Western Europe, especially Germany, faces challenges with sanctions and is trying to diversify its exports. The alternative for Germany party is on the rise. France aims to reduce US influence in Europe and assert its own position. Africa is signing new contracts with Russia and China related to ports and infrastructure. China is focused on undermining the United States without initiating a direct military conflict. Russia is attempting to sell as much oil as possible. India is buying large amounts of oil from Russia to resell to Europe. Japan's prime minister is seeking more support following his party's first polling losses in decades. Everyone has their own problems and understands that these events are largely meant to distract and occupy the public. It is widely accepted that former President Donald Trump will not be overturned. While this remains a significant issue in the United States, substantial change is unlikely. Story 136. Cool. So what? United States agencies are already actively burying the crimes related to Epstein raping small children. The law does not mean anything for rich United States people. Story 137. Shock that Anonymous is still relevant and not just a group of teenagers pretending to make a difference, and disbelief that it is not fake, whatever suits your preconceived position. Story 138. I'm sure there would be some interesting names on the list, but regarding Donald Trump, it would not change a single thing. 90% of us already know Trump is a pedophile and rapist. The rest either do not care or will not change. So him being there would change nothing. The only benefit would be to stop taking focus away from more serious matters. How much other wrongdoing has Donald Trump been involved in while people are so focused on the Epstein case? Story 139. Just because all the answers to a global question are America-centered. Outside of the United States, there is basically no question. Everybody knows that he is a rapist. When these files are released, the world will watch to see if Americans will get their act together this time. However, we should not get our hopes too high. While Americans blame Donald Trump, the world blames the United States for the misery we are in. The land of the free and the home of the brave is neither of those things. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.